Fall is in full swing, and the autumn colors, along with the cooler weather, puts me in the mood for a nourishing, warming, and hearty soup. We're starting this soup the day before by making some nourishing bone broth. First, I soaked about 1.5 pounds of grass-fed beef bones by covering them with filtered water and adding 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar. Then I drained this, then laid them out on a glass baking dish, salted them, and roasted them in a 375-degree oven for about an hour or until they became nice and browned. The browning process is important for developing the flavor of your broth, especially the pieces with meat on them. If you have some meaty pieces, that is going to make a very flavorful and delicious broth. I put just a couple tablespoons of apple cider vinegar and I covered them with water. I then added a few whole peppercorns and a bit of salt. I pressure cooked this for 2 hours and then I allowed it to naturally release. Now I'm straining out that broth, separating it from the bones, and I'm going to put it in the fridge until I'm ready to use it tomorrow. Bone broth has so many health benefits and has been used throughout history, with high amounts of collagen, gelatin, amino acids, glycine, glutamine, proline, just to name a few. It's beneficial for the gut lining, the skin, the joints, the cartilage, the immune system, and so much more. It's the next day, and before I'm starting my soup, I'm going to make some sourdough handmade noodles. I'm combining 50 grams of refreshed sourdough starter, 125 grams of whole grain einkorn flour, some salt, and 1 egg. I'm combining until it forms a ball, which requires the use of my hands as well. Let that rest for 15 minutes to absorb the moisture. Then knead it a few times and make sure that the moisture level is good. We're going to be rolling this and we don't want it too sticky and we don't want it too dry and crumbly. Cover your dough and allow to ferment while we make our soup. The soup we're making today is a traditional Hungarian goulash. This soup is the perfect hearty meal to start off the cold season with. And we're starting by chopping up 2 medium-sized yellow onions. Then I'm mincing about 3 garlic cloves. I'm going to saute my onions in a good amount of grass-fed tallow until they turn a little bit yellow. But make sure not to turn the heat up too high because browning them at all will give a bitter flavor. While the onions are sauteing on medium to medium-low heat, I am cutting up some grass-fed chuck roast into about 1-inch cubes. And once the onions have turned golden yellow, I'm adding 3 tablespoons of paprika and a little bit of hot paprika as well. It's best to use a Hungarian paprika. However, I don't know how easy it is to find an organic Hungarian paprika, so I used mostly just regular organic paprika and it turned out great. Make sure to constantly stir the paprika with the onions so it doesn't burn and get bitter. Next, add your beef cubes and keep stirring. Now it's time to add more salt, and I added probably a couple teaspoons here. And next we're adding our minced garlic. Then we're adding caraway seeds. And I added about 1.5 to 2 teaspoons. You might think it's a strange ingredient if you haven't cooked with it before, but this actually made an amazing flavor. Allow the meat to completely brown, then cover and braise the meat for probably 2 or 3 hours or until your meat becomes mostly tender. Make sure to frequently check it just in case you need to add a little bit more water, but don't add too much water so it's not boiling meat. While your meat is braising, it's time to prepare your other ingredients. And I'm going to chop up 2 medium-sized tomatoes, and next I'm chopping up 2 bell peppers. Traditionally, probably Hungarian wax peppers would have been used. If you can find those organic, that's great, but it also turned out very well with red bell peppers. Next, we're going to prepare our potatoes, and my favorite potato are yellow potatoes. I used about 3 or 4 pounds, and I'm cubing them into about 1-inch cubes. Once your noodle dough has fermented for about 3 hours, you can go ahead and prepare your noodle shapes. These are called szipetki, which are Hungarian pinch noodles, because we're actually going to pinch off pieces and that's going to form the little noodles. So break off a small portion at a time and roll out into small, thin ropes. You can add a bit of flour if you're having any sticking issues, but make sure you don't add too much flour so they don't dry out too much. So as you can see now, I'm just pinching off little pieces. Try to make them pretty small. Traditionally, this is a soup noodle from Hungary. Once you're finished, you can add a little bit of flour and just mix them around to make sure they're not sticking together. After 2 or 3 hours, your meat should be almost fully tender, and it's time to add the rest of the ingredients. First, add your potatoes and allow them to absorb some of the juices that are coming from your meat mixture. While that's cooking, I'm preparing my bone broth to be used. I'm taking it out of the refrigerator, and as you can see, a layer of fat or tallow has formed on top. I actually did not want to include this in my soup because there's already so much fat in it, and I didn't want it to be overwhelming. So I just picked it off and I'm going to save it for something else. You can see how gelatinous this is when it's cold. That is so healthy. Once your potatoes have cooked for just a few minutes with your meat and absorbed some flavor, you can add your tomatoes and peppers and combine. Next, add your healthy bone broth. The bone broth quickly becomes a liquid again, and you can bring this to a boil and then allow to simmer until your potatoes are tender. While your soup is simmering, you can cook your noodles. I prefer to cook my noodles separately instead of adding them directly in the big pot of soup, so that for each portion I can add as much as I want. So bring some water with salt to a boil and then sprinkle in your noodles to make sure they don't clump together. For this size noodle, it took about 10 to 15 minutes to be fully cooked, and I suggest tasting them to make sure that they taste done. Add them to a bowl with some butter and stir them up so that they don't clump together once they are out of the boiling water. I also added some salt. Once your potatoes are tender, it's time to enjoy. Many Hungarian dishes are served with sour cream. It goes so nicely with the rich paprika and peppers. If you've never made your own bone broth and tasted the difference in the quality of soup, I highly recommend giving it a try. It is amazing. Thanks for watching. I hope this video inspired you to make your own bone broth and maybe even your own sourdough noodles to enjoy with a hearty soup.